So you've got your series, you've got your parallel, you understand what cells are, modules and batteries. What's a BMS then? So the really important thing to understand about a lithium battery, a lithium cell more specifically within that battery, is that you have to operate it within very set limits in terms of its voltage, minimum voltage and maximum voltage, its currents and its temperatures. And the battery management system is what helps you do that. The management system sits on top of the battery and will have connections to a number of cells. You should read the rules on this, they're quite important. And those cells are measured directly for both voltage and for temperature. This allows you, together with a current measurement for the whole battery pack, this allows you to determine how the pack is operating, and you, as the originators and manufacturers of the vehicle, will have to put that in your control system. So what's the control system that reads the BMS? Well, firstly, the BMS is reading all those cells, and there'll be a BMS controller that sits within the battery. If you read the rules, you'll also realise that no high voltage is allowed to come outside of the battery case. So all those individual cell measurements have to be contained within the battery, and that means the BMS controller is generally laid out in slaves for each module, and then a master for the whole battery. They all have to stay within the module. And then you need to communicate that to your vehicle controller. If you think about your petrol car, that's essentially your ECU. It's going to control your inverter, which will drive the motor, and it's going to control the cooling, and it's going to control or speak to the BMS so that you manage your battery properly. It's important that you realise that the BMS is really the most important thing on the battery to control it safely. You can't overcharge it, you can't run the cells too low, otherwise you'll damage them, you can't run them too hot, or else you might run into problems with a thermal event, and no one wants that, especially not in a hotel room. So if you work on with that and carry on through, that will bring your BMS together. It's important to recognise that once you've sorted out the cells, the modules, the battery, and the battery casing, and the cooling, that the BMS is an electronic component within what is essentially a mechanical package of all of the cells within the casing. You then have to think about your bus bars. They're connecting your cells and modules together. If you've bought your modules in, they'll be done for you, but you've still got to connect the modules together. You've got to connect them to your current sensor. You've got to package your isolation monitoring. We'll talk more about that in a bit. And you've got to pull that all together within your main EV battery case, your energy storage unit case. So it's clear there's a fair bit of work to be done there, but you also have to understand that from the electronics and software point of view, you have to have a good BMS, and you have to be able to speak to it and understand it at your vehicle controller level so that you can manage the whole powertrain safely. This is a really key point. The most important point over the BMS is the isolation measurement, and we'll talk about that next.